Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Comment. WBUR senior health and science reporter Gabrielle Emanuel. Welcome back to The Comment.
Hi, good to be here.
Yes, indeed. So, Gabriella, we want to talk to you because Governor Maura Healey held a press conference Monday morning where she announced that the state will no longer guarantee shelter for families in Massachusetts. Now, many families in the state shelter system are recent arrivals from other countries. Gabriella, you've covered this press conference. You've covered this issue. Tell us about the governor's decision.
Yes. So let me start with the backdrop. Here in Massachusetts, as you said, the state has a law, a 1983 right to shelter law that basically obligates the state to provide shelter for eligible families. But over the past year, there has been a record number of families in need of housing. Now, that is partly because of the ongoing housing crisis, but as you said, it is also due to newly arrived migrants coming to Massachusetts, many from places like Haiti. And that's about half of the shelter population right now. Now, earlier this year, the governor announced a state of emergency. We were already kind of in a crunch. They were scrambling to find places and shelter providers. But now the governor is saying we are on the verge of hitting capacity. Here is Governor Maura Healey.
The reality we are facing now is this. We do not have enough space, service providers, or funds to safely expand beyond 7,500 families. We expect to hit that limit at the end of the month.
So she is basically creating a threshold at which the state will no longer guarantee families shelter. This has been threatened in the past, but it has never actually come to pass. So this would be a first, and experts tell me it would be a big break with precedent.
So help me understand. She's putting a cap on the amount of families the state can accept at 7,500, right? Where are we now?
We are at 7,002 families in the shelter system as of Tuesday morning. It is ticking up every day, but it takes a little bit of time to get the updated numbers. So that's where things stand now. That accounts for about 23,000 parents and children spread over 90 cities and towns. The shelter population has grown so much that we have run out of shelter units and we have run out of shelter providers. So about 3,000 of those 7,002 households are in overflow hotels and motels, and about 1,000 of those don't have a shelter provider. So it's the National Guard that's helping coordinate services.
Got it. So all in all, at this point, at the time of this recording, we have room, according to this new cap, for less than 500 families.
Exactly.
Wow. Was all of this a surprise to you, the governor's announcement?
There have been rumors and concerns about this among homeless advocates. When the governor declared a state of emergency, there were some questions about whether she would put a cap on at that point. So it did not come out of nowhere. However, the reaction on the ground is mixed. Some shelter providers are understanding and saying we are absolutely at capacity. We have no space to put people. And others are saying this is the law and our obligation and the right thing to do to your fellow person. So there's a lot of dismay also about this.
Right. Well, for some of that dismay, Massachusetts is the only state in the country that guarantees the right to shelter for families experiencing homelessness, right? That being a statewide policy. Does this open the door for lawsuits against the state?
Yes. So Massachusetts is the only state with a law about the right to shelter. New York, I will say, has a judge order. So they also have a right to shelter, but it comes through a judge, a little bit of a different path. But this right to shelter is in our law. And at the press conference, Governor Maura Healey was asked about whether she was respecting and following that law. Here's what she said.
I want to be very clear with the public. We are not ending the right to shelter law. We will comply with the right to shelter law. That said, we are reaching capacity, which is why it's all the more important that we're able to support people exiting shelter and also able to triage the families who are coming in.
So I have spoken to some homeless advocates, and they say they're consulting with their legal partners to determine whether a wait list could prompt a legal challenge, given that in the law there are specific timelines laid out. So it kind of remains to be seen what will happen on the legal side of this.
Understood. Now, have you talked to any advocates or state officials about this?
Yes, I have. And I actually spoke with Liz Alfred of Greater Boston Legal Services, and I wanted to know what would happen to families after we hit that threshold. Presumably, there will continue to be homeless families. What will kind of happen to them? And she told me we know what will happen to them because we can look at all the families that are currently deemed ineligible for our system. So there are already strict eligibility requirements. So for all those families that don't make it into the shelter system, she said, we know what happens to them. Here's Liz Alfred.
They stay in places that are unheated, or they stay in cars, or they stay outside, or they stay in abusive situations. I think we will see more families having to stay in places that are not safe for them.
I have heard from a number of homeless advocates that say they hope the state sets up large temporary congregate facilities like what you might see after a hurricane or another natural disaster so that families have a roof over their head while they wait for a spot in the shelter system. And Healey did mention this at the press conference, although she said she'd like to see the federal government set up these large sites.
Yeah, well, what could federal intervention look like at this point?
Healey was very clear that she argued this is a federal problem that demands a federal solution. She has blamed the situation squarely on the migrant crisis, the number of people coming into Massachusetts, and said she would like to see the federal government not only fund kind of the basic needs, but she would also like to see them expedite work permits because many of the people who come have to wait months, if not longer, into the years to get the authorization to work. And if you don't have a job, it's very hard to leave shelter. So she has actually, her administration is focusing on that exit to free up space in the shelter system for new families.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back with more from Gabrielle Emanuel. Another component to this news is the governor is appointing someone to oversee the state shelter system. Talk to us about who this person is and what do we know about them?
Exactly. So the governor announced a new person to lead the shelter system, Lieutenant General Scott Rice. He served in the Air Force and with the Massachusetts National Guard. When he was there, he oversaw various natural disasters, as well as the Boston Marathon bombing. Speaking at the press conference on Monday, here is what Rice said.
I've responded firsthand to many statewide emergencies. It is important to me that our state succeeds in meeting this humanitarian challenge. I'll bring all my values and all I've learned to bear on this crisis.
Many people on the ground have called for better management, coordination, communication at the state level. So I think folks are looking to see whether Rice will bring that change they want to see.
Got it. Gabriella, what does this announcement say about the current state of housing in Massachusetts? Could this be an opportunity to really center the lack of housing in the state?
Yeah, it's a hard question because there's been a long-term issue with affordable housing in the state, and then compounding it right now is this kind of growth in the new arrivals. And that's something we're seeing across the country. Many different states and cities are scrambling to figure out how to support newly arrived migrants. So you'll see that in New York, Chicago, DC, lots of different places that haven't really had to deal with the things the southern border has had to deal with for a long time, are just kind of grappling with what to do. So it's a combination of those two different issues. However, I've heard advocates say this is an opportunity to kind of really look at evictions and eviction protections such that maybe longtime residents don't enter homelessness given the state of the shelter system. So I do think it's very interwoven with the affordable housing crisis right now.
Got it. And what happens to families after the state reaches that 7,500 cap? Say if you're a migrant family coming to Massachusetts, you just missed it. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, well, we're going to have to wait to see what happens on the ground. There will be this wait list, and the wait list will be prioritizing families that are at high risk, so safety and health risks. However, a lot of the families that already enter the shelter system meet that criteria of having a health or safety risk. So it's very unclear. I think we will see more homelessness that's not in the shelter because we've had this state family shelter system. Our nonprofit sector shelters, family shelters, have not been built up. They just don't exist in our state the way they do in other states. So I think we will see more homelessness is what I am hearing. Homelessness, on the streets or staying in hospitals or in unsafe situations. For example, I've spoken to families that have stayed kind of in an unfinished basement, that type of scenario. We may see more of that. Another thing that advocates are concerned about is whether the state will create kind of a two-tiered system, one for newly arrived migrants and a separate one for longtime residents. These homeless advocates I spoke to are very concerned about that, do not want to see that, given that all the families meet very strict eligibility requirements. They are worried about that, so that's something we'll have to watch for.
Understood. What will you be watching for, having said all that?
I think we'll have to see how this all rolls out. As I said, there have been threats of a wait list before. It's never come to pass. So we're going to have to see in just a few weeks. We don't have to wait very long to see if it does actually happen and then how it plays out.
Gabriella, thank you so much. I know there's a lot going on. This is still developing. So we'll be checking in with you soon. Thank you so much for coming through to The Common.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
That's WBUR Senior Health and Science reporter Gabrielle Emanuel. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. This story is developing and Gabriella is on top of it, so head on over to WBUR.org to check out her coverage as it unfolds. And if you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common or send us an email at thecommon@WBUR.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.